The moment my sister-in-law said, "It's just a joke, relax," I was already standing alone on the departures level of Pittsburgh International Airport with no phone, no wallet, and no idea which direction led to anything familiar. I still don't fully understand how I let it get to that point. But I do know this. The people who were supposed to love me thought watching me panic was funny. And I made a decision that night that changed everything. My husband's family had always been the kind of people who tested you. Not in obvious ways, not with cruelty you could point to, but in small, grinding ways that made you question your own reactions. My mother-in-law had this thing she called toughening people up. She said it at dinner tables, at birthday parties, at Christmas. She believed that the best way to show love was to push people past their limits and see what they were made of. I'd been married to her son for 3 years by then. 3 years of swallowing my discomfort every time someone at the table laughed at my expense. 3 years of my husband telling me I was too sensitive. 3 years of being the outsider who smiled through everything because I was trying so hard to belong. My name is Sasha. I'm 31 years old, and I should have walked away long before Pittsburgh. The trip was supposed to be a family reunion in Philadelphia. My husband's grandmother's 80th birthday. My mother-in-law organized everything: the hotel, the dinner reservation, the drive down. We flew into Pittsburgh first to pick up my brother-in-law, who'd just finished a work assignment there. Then we'd all drive together to Philly in the rental van. There were 7 of us at the airport: my husband, my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, my brother-in-law, my husband's younger sister, her boyfriend, and me. I remember being in a good mood that day. I'd bought new sneakers for the trip. I'd made my mother-in-law's favorite cookies and packed them in my carry-on as a gesture. I was trying. I was always trying. We landed around 4 in the afternoon, picked up my brother-in-law curbside, and loaded into the rental van. We were supposed to leave straight for Philadelphia. The drive was about 6 hours. The plan was to arrive by 10 or 11, check in, sleep, and start the celebration the next morning. But my mother-in-law wanted coffee. She always wanted coffee. There was a whole conversation about stopping at some place she'd read about in Pittsburgh, some small batch roaster downtown. My father-in-law said we didn't have time. She said we always had time for good coffee. My husband sided with her like he always did. So we detoured. We ended up parking in a garage near the Strip District, the whole group spilling out onto the sidewalk. I hadn't slept well the night before. Anxiety about the trip, about being around his family for 4 days. And the cold air hit me harder than I expected. My bag was in the back of the van. I'd left my phone charging on the seat because the airport had drained my battery. "I'll wait here," I told my husband. "I'll just grab my jacket from the bag." He was already walking with his mother. He waved a hand at me without turning around. "We'll be quick. Just come." I hesitated. The garage was open air, and the February air coming off the Allegheny was bitter. I thought about the jacket. I thought about my phone on the seat. I should have grabbed both. Instead, I jogged to catch up with the group, because I didn't want to be the person who held everyone back. We were at the coffee shop for maybe 40 minutes. His grandmother called while we were inside, and suddenly there was a long conversation about arrival times and which hotel exit to use. And my mother-in-law ordered for everyone without asking what anyone wanted. And I stood at the edge of the group with a coffee I didn't like, just waiting. When we got back to the garage, my father-in-law couldn't find the ticket. That was another 15 minutes. By the time we got the van out, we were nearly 90 minutes behind schedule, and his mother was in a mood. I was sitting in the middle row, between my husband and his sister. His sister's boyfriend was in the back. My brother-in-law was up front with my father-in-law. My mother-in-law had the passenger seat, which she always claimed. We merged onto I-376 heading east. The van was loud, music from the back, my mother-in-law complaining about the delay, my brother-in-law on his own phone. I'd finally plugged my phone back in and was watching the battery creep up. I needed at least 20% before I'd feel okay. Somewhere around Monroeville, my husband said he needed to stop. He'd been drinking coffee and water since the airport, and he couldn't wait. My mother-in-law sighed like he'd personally wronged her. My father-in-law took the next exit. There was a service plaza off the highway, one of those old Pennsylvania Turnpike stops with a gas station, and a fast food place, and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look exhausted. The van pulled in and almost everyone got out. I wasn't sure I needed the bathroom. My phone was at 12%. I decided to stay in the van and wait, keep it charging. "You coming?" my husband asked through the door. "I'm good, I'll stay." He shrugged. They all went in. I sat in the van alone. The parking lot was half empty, a few truckers, a family with a minivan loading up snacks. I watched the battery number, 13, 14, 15. Then I heard laughter. close, outside the van. I looked up. My mother-in-law was standing near the hood of the van, and my husband was next to her, and his sister was there too, and they were all laughing at something on my mother-in-law's phone. Even my father-in-law was smiling. My brother-in-law was saying something I couldn't hear through the glass. I assumed it was a video. They were always passing videos around. The van doors were locked, my father-in-law's habit. I watched them through the windshield, bundled in their coats, completely at ease. My mother-in-law looked up once, directly at the van, and said something. They all laughed again. I didn't think anything of it. Then the van started moving. Not fast, just easing out of the parking spot. I sat up straight. I thought maybe my father-in-law had gotten back in the driver's side without me noticing, but when I looked forward, the front seat was empty. The van rolled back slowly, then forward, and I realized someone had released the parking brake from outside. I grabbed the door handle. Locked. Hey, I knocked on the window. Hey, what are you doing? Through the glass I could see them. My husband had his hand over his mouth. His sister was doubled over. My mother-in-law was filming on her phone. The van rolled about 20 feet and stopped. My father-in-law must have left it in neutral on flat ground. Okay, funny, I said to no one. I waited for someone to come unlock the door. Nobody came. Then I watched the whole group walk back toward the service plaza entrance. I knocked harder. Hey, seriously, open the door. My mother-in-law turned around once. She made a little wave, the kind you give someone you're leaving behind. And then she was gone through the sliding doors. I sat there for a full minute, I think, maybe 2. I told myself they were just messing around. They'd come back in 30 seconds. This was the kind of thing they thought was funny, that edge where the joke goes just far enough to make you squirm. 5 minutes passed. I looked at my phone. 16%. I unlocked it and called my husband voicemail. I called his sister, voicemail. I called my father-in-law's cell, voicemail. I texted, what's going on? This isn't funny. Someone come let me out. No reply. I thought about the fact that the van was unlocked from the outside. I thought about the parking lot. I thought about the cold. I was in a locked vehicle in a rest stop, and the people who had my bag, my jacket, my credit cards, my ID. Everything except this phone had walked away laughing. 10 minutes. 15. I called my husband again. This time it rang twice before going to voicemail. He'd seen it. He'd declined it. That was the moment something shifted in me. Not panic. Something quieter than panic and much colder. I looked at the van's interior. My overnight bag was in the back. I could see the top of it. The van doors were locked from outside with the key fob, but the interior door release should still work. I tried it. It didn't. Child lock or some feature of this rental I didn't understand. I climbed to the front and tried the driver's side. Same, I sat back down. I had 16% battery, and no jacket, and no idea how long they planned to let this go on. I called my own mother. She didn't pick up. She worked evening shifts at the time, and she kept her phone on silent. I texted her. I'm at a service plaza on I-76 near Monroeville, PA. I don't know what's happening. Please call me when you see this. Then I sat there and thought about what I actually knew. I knew the service plaza was staffed. I knew there were people inside. I knew that at some point, someone who worked at that gas station would come to deal with a vehicle that had rolled out of its spot and been sitting idle for 20 minutes with a person trapped inside. I started knocking on the window every time someone walked by. Most people looked at me like I was strange. One man in a Steelers jacket stopped and mouthed something at me. I pointed at the door. He tried the handle from the outside, found it locked, and shrugged. He didn't have a key, obviously, but he didn't walk away. He said something through the glass I couldn't fully hear, and then he walked toward the plaza entrance. He came back 4 minutes later with a woman in a yellow vest, plaza staff. She had a radio on her hip, and the look of someone who had seen everything. She knocked on the window. I said, loudly, I'm locked in. The people with the key went inside and I can't reach them. She got on her radio. Within a few minutes, a man who worked for the rental company, there happened to be a rental return kiosk at this plaza, came out with some kind of override device for the door system. He got it open on the driver's side. I climbed out into the cold February air and nearly collapsed with relief. You okay? The woman in the vest asked. I think so. I was shaking. I didn't know how much of it was temperature and how much was something else. Were those your family members who went inside? Yes. She looked at me for a moment. Do you want us to go get them? I thought about it. I pictured my mother-in-law seeing the plaza staff come to retrieve her, and the way she'd smile like it had all been so harmless and silly, and how my husband would put his arm around me and say, come on. You knew we were coming back, and how I'd stand there in the cold parking lot and swallow all of it like I always did. No, I said, I'll go in. I went in. They were in the food court area, all 7 of them, sitting at a table with cups and wrappers in front of them. My mother-in-law saw me first. She actually clapped her hands together and said, "See? She found her way out. Like I'd solved a puzzle. Like I'd won something." My husband stood up. "There she is. How'd you get out?" I looked at him. I looked at all of them. My brother-in-law was grinning. His sister was nudging her boyfriend and saying something. My mother-in-law was still holding her phone, and I knew she had video of all of it. "Give me my bag," I said. My husband's smile wavered. "What? My overnight bag? It's in the back of the van." "I need it. Sasha, come on, it was a joke. I know it was a joke." My voice was very calm. I surprised myself. "I need my bag." My father-in-law went out and got it. He set it on the table in front of me. I unzipped it, found my wallet, found the backup charging cable I always packed. I checked that my ID was there. It was. My mother-in-law said, "You're not seriously upset, are you?" We were right inside. We were watching the whole time. I looked at her. I thought about 3 years of swallowing things. I thought about the woman in the yellow vest who came to check on me, and the rental company employee who didn't know me at all, but got the door open because that was the right thing to do. I thought about the fact that I had called my husband 4 times, and he declined the last call. "I'm going to get a hotel tonight," I said. "I'll get the train to Philly tomorrow morning." Silence. "You're overreacting," my husband said. His voice had the edge it got when he felt embarrassed. "This is exactly what my mom is talking about. You can't take a joke." "I know," I said. "I really can't." I picked up my bag. I put it over my shoulder. I walked to the counter and asked the woman there if she could call me a cab or tell me the closest rideshare pickup point. She was kind. She pointed me toward the side entrance and said the pickup zone was just outside. I sat outside in the cold for 9 minutes waiting for the car. My phone was at 14%. I had 3 texts from my husband. The first 2 saying to stop being dramatic. The third saying, "Fine, do what you want." Nothing from anyone else. The driver who picked me up was a woman in her 50s, with a pine tree air freshener and a thermos of something that steamed when she opened it. She looked at me, coat still in the van, sitting in 28-degree air, and said, "Honey, do you need a blanket? I've got one in the back." I said yes. She passed it back without another word. I cried for the first 10 minutes of that ride. I didn't try to hide it, and she didn't comment on it. She just drove. When we got to the Hampton Inn in Monroeville that I'd booked on my phone in the pickup zone, she stopped the car and said, "Whatever it is, you made the right call getting out of there." I don't know what she saw in those 10 minutes that told her that, but she was right. I checked in with my debit card and the cash I had in my wallet. $80-something, enough for one night. The room was plain and warm, and the television had a home improvement channel that I turned on just for the noise. I sat on the edge of the bed with my bag at my feet and my phone plugged into the wall. My mother called me back around 9:30. I told her everything. She was quiet for a long time, and then she said, "Sasha, this is not the first time something like this has happened with them." She was right about that too. My husband called 4 times between 8 and midnight. I let them all go to voicemail. I read the transcripts in the morning. The first 2 were frustrated. Why was I making this a bigger deal than it was? Why did I have to ruin the weekend? His grandmother was going to be upset. The third was softer. Look, his mom shouldn't have filmed it. He got that. The fourth was the one I kept coming back to. He said, "I know you're hurt, but you have to understand that's just how my family is. You've known that. You chose this. You chose this." I lay in that Hampton Inn bed and I thought about that sentence for a long time. In the morning, I took an Amtrak from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia. 3 hours, a window seat, a coffee from the cafe car. I got into Philly around noon, and I took a cab to the hotel where everyone was already checked in. I went straight to my room. I didn't go to the birthday dinner that night. I texted my husband's grandmother directly and told her I wasn't feeling well, but I was so glad she was celebrating 80 years, and I meant it. She was genuinely the warmest person in that family, the one who had always made me feel welcome without conditions. She texted back, "I hope you feel better, my dear. Save me a dance when you're well." I didn't go to the party. I went to a diner 3 blocks from the hotel and had eggs and toast and black coffee at 6 in the evening. The waitress called me Han and refilled my cup 3 times without being asked. I sat there for almost 2 hours. I thought about what I wanted my life to look like. Not the life I had been trying to maintain, the one where I smoothed every edge and smiled through every test and told myself it would get easier, that I just needed to try harder to fit in. The actual life I wanted. The one where I didn't have to be toughened up because I was already enough. I flew home alone 2 days early. I told my husband I was leaving. He didn't try to stop me. The paperwork took 6 months. The conversations were hard and then they were harder and then they were done. My mother-in-law never apologized. She sent me a card after the divorce was finalized that said she hoped I found what I was looking for, which I understood to mean that she thought I was the problem. Maybe she still does. But here is the thing about that service plaza in Monroeville. I think about it more than I think about the wedding, more than I think about the first apartment, more than I think about any of the good years before things turned. I think about climbing to the front seat and trying every door. I think about knocking on the window while strangers walked by. I think about the woman in the yellow vest who came out to check because someone told her there was a person trapped, and the rental company employee who had no reason to help me but did anyway. I think about a cab driver who handed me a blanket without making me explain. I think about the fact that people I'd never met treated me with more care in those 2 hours than my own family had in 3 years of trying. I kept going. I figured it out. Not because my husband's family ever came through, but because strangers did. And because I finally let myself believe that was enough reason to stop waiting for the people who wouldn't. My mother-in-law wanted to know what I was made of. Now I know. That's the one thing I'll always be grateful to her for.